And she basically just asked my mom, like, oh, what are you doing here? And I'm like, she asked you what you're doing here? Like, we're not on a tour to see a school? Hey y'all, what's up? It's your girl Destiny Ariana, and today I'm back with another video. And as you guys can see from the title, today we'll be talking about being black at a predominantly white institution. But before we get into this video, if you aren't already subscribed, please click that subscribe button and click the bell notification so you can get notified whenever I post a video. Okay, so I guess before I start, I just want to let you guys know that this video is completely subjective. It's based off of my experiences. I definitely don't want people reflecting my own experiences with every black student's experiences at predominantly white schools. This is just me sharing my story. And I hope that, you know, it's informative for whoever's watching. I guess the first thing that I'd like to speak about would be my transition into college, being a black student. So I went to a predominantly black high school. And my high school is also a charter school, so I've been with the same kids basically from 5th grade until 12th grade. So going from a predominantly black school into a PWI was definitely a new experience for me. I was used to being around POC, I was used to being around black people all the time, you know, never having to explain myself, never having to, you know, like code switch or just not really being conscious of my identity as a black person in a space, because that's what I was surrounded by. That's where I feel most comfortable. And that was what I was used to. So taking me from that community and putting me into a PWI, basically I experienced a culture shock. So when I say culture shock, it wasn't just because I was in a white space. But that was definitely a big part of it. But I was exposed to just a crazy amount of wealth. So if you guys don't know or have looked at Bowdoin's like stats or anything, Bowdoin's makeup of students, basically, like, I think a little over 50% of students are paying like full tuition. And a lot of people come from millionaire and billionaire families, and that was something that I was never used to. Like, it was definitely crazy for me, you know, getting here and seeing that I guess firsthand. Like, one of the main things that I remember is being a first year, they have this thing called like perspectives, where they put on a show sort of thingy where they share students' experiences, and it's anonymous, but they're performed by actors and actresses. And they turn into like a questionnaire thing where you like sit up if something applied to you. So I remember sitting there and they were asking questions like, stand up if, you know, you identify as white or Caucasian. And I felt like the whole room just like lifted and I was like left on the ground. And like, I don't know how to explain that, but it was the first time where I truly had a physical representation of what it felt like to be a minority in the space. But that was something that I was used to. Like, going into Bowdoin and applying to Bowdoin, I knew that I was signing up to be at a predominantly white institution. So off rip, I kind of already knew that. But what got me was, I don't know if you guys know this, but I identify as African American and Native American. So when they asked who identifies as Native American, I was probably one of 2 students to stand up. I didn't expect there to be a lot of Native American students here, or people who identified as Native American. And just to sort of see that balance was interesting. And also then when they called up like the black students, I just sort of saw familiar faces, but there were like maybe 30 plus people who stood up. And that was like I don't want to say a handful, but like a couple handfuls of you know, black people, and I sort of felt comfortable with that. But they asked a question about socioeconomic status, and they wanted to know basically like where you felt like your family or yourself was placed on like class ranking. So they would ask like, okay, like who identifies as, you know, lower class, you know, middle class, lower middle class, upper middle class, and then higher class, and then wealthy. I probably left out some things, but I remember, you know, standing up for a working class family, and I saw like a pretty decent amount of students, and like that was solidifying for me, you know, to see. It was like probably the same amount of Black students that stood up, and then they asked the question of wealth, and I swear to you, like 100 kids stood up, and I was like, so 100 of you consider yourselves to be wealthy, and like for me, wealthy is like a lot. Like that's something that even sometimes I feel like is probably unobtainable for me. So I guess that was one of my first real shocker moments at Bowdoin, of just realizing like, wow, like not I'm at a PWI, but like, okay, I definitely go to a PWI, and I'm definitely surrounded by people that have money. I definitely would say, like, for me, so far, like, my Bowdoin experience has been challenging, but challenging in the best ways, because I went to college with the mindset that I want to grow. I want to be challenged. Like, I do not want to be the same person that I was coming into college. Like, I need to be completely different. Like, my goal is to evolve in the best way possible. You know, I always say this on my Instagram if you guys see, but, like, the evolution is internal. You know, like, I want to grow. I want my mind to change. Like, I want to be able to prosper in like all aspects of my life, make sure that mentally I'm okay, that academically I'm growing and challenging myself. Like, I just want to make sure that I'm growing and changing. I don't want to be the same, because that's just not happening. You know, so I definitely feel like Bowdoin's helped me grow in those ways. It always hasn't been the easiest. Academically, it hasn't been the easiest, and I've talked to you guys about that, but I feel like this video is important because I've never spoke about my racial position at Bowdoin, so I think that this is very important and something that definitely should be spoken upon. So I guess questions that people ask me a lot about being a Black student here is, have I experienced any, you know, racial tensions, any racial inequalities, or just like microaggressions? And I would definitely say that I haven't experienced any racial tensions from Bowdoin students or faculty specifically. I've encountered, you know, racial microaggressions within the town and also on a tour. So I'm going to speak about these real quick. So the first time before I even got to Bowdoin, like I went on a tour, I think in March of 2017. I'll never forget, like we walked into the info session room, and it was me and my entire family, you know, my mom, my dad, my brother, my other brother, and my two sisters, and me. And we walked into the room. All the seats were basically taken, and all of them were filled with white people. I'm not even like lying in any sort of way. Every seat in the room was filled by a white person. And you had this whole like Black family just walking in. And like, of course I felt the tension like as soon as I walked in, because that's something I always notice is when I'm the only Black person in the room. It just happens. And I remember like us like trying to find chairs or whatever. The admissions people helped us get chairs. And that hit me sort of, but like I wasn't really worried about the racial differences like while the info session was going on. I was more concerned about seeing if Bowdoin was a school for me. You know, and I remember when we got out right before we went on the tour, my mom had like tapped me and she's like, "You will never believe it just happened." And I was like, "What happened? Like, what are you talking about?" And basically this white family like came over to my mom, and they were just like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, she asked you what you're doing here? Like, we're not on a tour to see a school? Like, I'm not understanding. We're all in the same place and doing the same thing, I assume. And then my mom hits her with the, "Oh, you know, my daughter got accepted and she is looking at possible options and Bowdoin's one of them." And this woman looked so taken aback. She was just like she got into Bowdoin? And I just was like, what? Like, it for some people it might not rub the wrong way. For me, definitely, like, it did, because I felt the tension of like walking up to my parents sort of already with this pretentious attitude, and then you're like so shocked that I actually like got into the school. So I don't know, that was something that happened to me like even before I got in, but it wasn't like any Bowdoin people specifically, it was just people on the tour. Then there was other time my freshman year where I was getting on the bus to go to Portland to like fix my MacBook or something, and there was these two white women sitting on the side of me. Like, this is the bus, I decided to sit like right here, and they're like right directly across on the other side. And I'm sitting there, and before I even play my music, I hear them like whispering about me, and I'm nosy, so I wanted to know what they were talking about. So I'm just like, let me like listen. And I hear them whispering, oh, do you think she goes to Bowdoin? And then the other one's like, no, she's probably just visiting someone that's there, you know, or like just passing through. And like, this was the first time where I was sort of like alone in the situation and had felt offended by something that a white person has said. And me and my mom have had multiple conversations of whether like to pick your battles and like stuff like that. So like, I'm still learning this to this day, like things that I respond to or choose not to respond to. It was definitely something where I sat there for maybe like 30 minutes, and they were still on the bus, and I just was like so confused. I was irritated, I was angry. I'm like, what makes you think that I don't like belong here or go here? You know, like, it just bothered me so much, and like I didn't know what to say or respond to the situation, or if I even should, or just like leave it alone. So I decided that when I got off the bus, I took off one earphone and I basically just said, yeah, I do go to Bowdoin. But yeah, I guess another thing about me being black at a predominantly white institution is that they're definitely like, it's completely normal to feel like you're the only black person in the room, or the only black person in the space, or the only black person like within a field, a major. Like, I happen to major in Africana studies, so they're more POC like within that field. But I know people who are in STEM, that the higher up you get in STEM, the POC seem to disappear, you know. And you definitely have those experiences at school where you're the only black person in the room. Like, at first, it just made me really uncomfortable. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, being the only black girl in the room, the first time it happened to me was like in my drawing class, where I walked in, I saw like no shades of brown, anything, and I was just like, okay, so like, it's hit me. Like, everybody tells me, like, all of the friends I have that have gone to predominantly white institutions, like, there's gonna be a time where you're the only black person in the room, and it hadn't happened for like a year. So I was like, okay, cool, whatever. And then it happened to me, and it was sort of like this subconscious thing of like, in my head, I'm just over analyzing like situations, and you know, just thinking about myself in this space in relation to everyone else. And eventually that went away. I think that it just dawned on me because this is my first experience with that. But something that I knew like from the beginning of going to a predominantly white institution is that I knew that I needed to find my community. Like, I knew I needed to find my safe space on campus, that if anything happened, if I needed to talk to anyone about anything, I needed people who would understand me. And for me, that was finding the black community at Bowdoin, which is AFAM, now known as the Black Student Union. But I knew that I needed that for my sanity being here, just because I need to be surrounded by people who are also academics, but who are black and understand what it's like to be black at a predominantly white school, because it is something that is challenging, and there are things that are going to happen to you and things that you're going to go through, and you're going to need people who understand you completely in those situations. And that's something that I knew I needed, and the support that I knew I needed outside of like my family. So definitely one thing that I always recommend you should do is find your safe space on campus, whatever that is for you. Please find it. I said this in my other video, I'm gonna keep saying it. Please find your safe space on campus where you can find people that will help you in any ways that you need. Talking about like uncomfortability, and I feel like that fluctuates for me. Like, there are days where I really don't care about being like the black person in the room at all. Like there's like, it's not something that's completely dawning on me all the time, so I don't want to misrepresent that to anyone, but it definitely fluctuates. Like there's some days where I'm just on campus and I'm just like, I'm in this very white space in a very white state. Like, why did I do this to myself? Because there are just times where I feel isolated and alone, but there are other days where I'm just like, I'm out here, I'm thriving, you know, it's whatever. Something else that I guess I've experienced being a black person at a predominantly white institution is code switching. So like, I mentioned this early in the video, I've never really had to code switch at like my high school or like being at home. And then like I got here, I don't know if you guys can hear it, but like I'm from New York, and when I got here everybody was like, oh my god, you have a New York accent, blah 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 blah. And it was really crazy for me because I'm used to speaking a certain way with my friends and like, you know, talking however I talk, and I found myself every time that I would engage in conversation with other people, I had to over explain what I was saying, you know, all the time. And that was something I wasn't used to. I was used to just people understanding me. So having to code switch and like change my vernacular to better suit the environment that I'm in was something that I had to learn how to do really fast. I still don't know how I really feel about it. It's an ongoing internal discussion that I have with myself, like, but you know, it's definitely something that I've had to do. The thing that I've dealt with is being confused for other black girls. So there are times where I'll get called somebody else's name and then I correct them and the person's like, oh my god, blah blah blah. Like sometimes people are very apologetic about it and sometimes people really just don't care, and I'm just like, you really think it's okay to be calling me somebody else's name, but it just doesn't faze you, but like you don't care. Anyway, something else that I've experienced being a black at a predominantly white institution is, this is my first time really having experiences with like colorism and like seeing how that plays out in institutions like this. And like, I don't know how to say this, but like I've learned that being a darker skinned black woman, like at predominantly white institutions, we are probably like the most undesired people on campus. And not that I'm out here like wanting everybody to check for me or anything, but like that hit me differently too, where I feel like in my high school people didn't really worry about those things, or I just didn't see them because I wasn't aware. But here is very potent of who's desired on campus and who's not, and like that happens a lot, you know, and it's something I'm still learning how to navigate. Like I'm only a sophomore, there's more things that I have to learn, but that's definitely something I've experienced. And also, like, I know I'm telling you guys to find your own communities, but you have to also be mindful about the people in your communities. Like, even black communities on campus are not always going to be completely unified. Like, of course, there are always going to be, you know, circles within a circle. It happens. But I've seen instances in which people have turned their backs on each other, people aren't lifting each other up. That, like, sometimes communities need to do better, you know, do better at supporting each other, do better at lifting each other up and, like, being that resource of help, or just overall just, like, moral support. And that sometimes isn't where it should be. And I think that if you notice that, you know, if you don't want to be the one to speak up, talk to somebody else about how you guys can speak up or present it, because things like that need to be called out, in my opinion. You know, if a community isn't supplying its community with the support that is needed, then that community needs to work on it. Just like the last point that I would bring up is wanting to take initiatives. Like, I think being black at a predominantly white institution, you have to remind yourself that you belong there just as much as anybody else does. You got in and you belong there. Do not let anyone tell you that you don't belong in a space, you own that space. Like, anyone, do not let anyone tell you that you don't belong there, because you do. You got in just as they got in, and you've earned your place there. So do not let anyone tell you that you didn't. Like, I swear, like, that's one of my key words of advice to anyone. And I have a professor, if you guys go to Bowdoin, Theo Green, he's amazing. He always says this. I just had a meeting with him not too long ago, but he says, get yours. And basically, like, what that means is, like, you're in a space, secure your bag, get what you need to get, and take complete advantage of that. Those are some things that I guess I wanted to speak about with my experiences, and just different things I want to touch on about being a Black woman, a Black student at a predominantly white institution. And if you guys have any questions about anything that I've said, or anything you want me to speak more about, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to speak about this more. And I hope that you guys learned something from this video, or if anything's unclear or something you would like to know more about, just let me know. Like, please reach out to me, because I'd love to talk about it. But again, thank you so much for watching this video, and stay tuned for more content. I'll see you guys on the next one.